Daniel Voss was 44, ex-cop Boise PD, retired at 38 after a back injury. He worked private investigation freelance, mostly divorce surveillance, mostly boring. The job came through a referral. A man named Mark Pearson paid him $3,000 in cash plus per diem to watch a cabin in the Salmon-Challis National Forest, Idaho. Cash always meant a man who wanted no paper trail more than he wanted a discount, above market, for 4 days. Mark's wife of 11 years had filed for divorce in March. She'd moved in with another man at a cabin owned by that man's family. Mark wanted to know what their daily routine looked like. Daniel's instructions were specific. Do not approach the cabin. Do not photograph the people. Just document times. When does she leave? When does he leave? When do they return? What kind of vehicles? Patterns? Daniel had done 200 jobs like this. None of them had ever paid in cash. He set up his blind 300 meters from the cabin on a ridge above. He had a vortex spotting scope. He had a 6-pack of MREs, 4 gallons of water, a mountain hardware tent 50 meters behind the blind, and 3 trail cameras placed along the cabin's access road. The trail cameras would tell him if anyone unexpected arrived. Day 1, he wrote 18 entries. Day 2, 14. Day 3, 11. Their routine was unremarkable. He worked from home. She worked at a veterinary clinic in Stanley. They cooked together. They went to bed early. They didn't argue. Daniel called his client every evening from a satellite phone. Mark asked if they touched. Daniel said he couldn't see inside the cabin. Mark asked again. Daniel said he wasn't watching them through windows. That wasn't the job. Mark said, okay. The conversation always ended the same way. Day 4. Evening, Daniel pulled the SD cards from his 3 trail cameras and reviewed them on his laptop. Routine procedure. He was looking for unexpected visitors, hikers, other vehicles. He found frames of himself. Trail camera number 2, the one closest to the cabin, had captured 43 frames between 3:11 in the morning and 3:13 in the morning. Daniel standing in the trees, facing the camera. He could see his own face clearly. He could see the patch on his Carhartt where he'd torn it on a fence 2 years ago. He could see the chip in his front tooth. Daniel hadn't been there at 3 in the morning. He'd been asleep in the tent 50 meters back. He checked his watch. He checked the GPS log from his satellite phone. It showed him stationary at the tent through the whole night. He looked at the frames again. The man in the frames was looking at the camera directly. The eyes were focused. Daniel pulled the SD card from trail camera 3. Same time window. 28 frames of him standing in different trees. Same clothes, same face, same stance. He didn't sleep day 4. Day 5, he checked the access road. He walked it carefully. He found his own boot prints from day 1 through day 4. Vask Trapper size 10. He found other prints next to his. Same tread pattern, same brand, a size larger, 11.5. The other prints were fresh. They were not there day 4. The other prints walked alongside his prints for 200 meters and stopped. Daniel returned to his blind. He packed his gear. He hauled out at 11 that morning. He drove 8 hours back to Boise, stopped once for fuel in Twin Falls, paid cash. He didn't want a card transaction in case anyone was checking. He returned the remaining $2,000 to Mark Pearson at a coffee shop in Boise. He told Mark the job was over. He didn't explain. Mark didn't ask. Mark looked at his face and didn't ask. Daniel kept the SD cards. He showed the frames to an old colleague from a federal task force he'd worked with at Boise PD. The colleague was an analyst, forensic image work. The colleague spent 6 hours running tests. The colleague said the footage wasn't tampered with. The colleague said the man in the frames was not a deep fake or a composite. The colleague said the man in the frames was Daniel. The colleague said this was the second case like it he'd seen this year. He didn't say where the first one was. Mark Pearson hired another investigator 11 months later after his lawyer pressed him for evidence. That investigator did not come back. The cabin sold in April 2025. The wife moved to Twin Falls alone. The boyfriend was never reported missing. He was not officially missing. Daniel doesn't take overnight jobs anymore. Some woods make you trade places you don't notice until you're already on the other side. Frank Mills was 52, civil engineer in Burlington, Vermont. His daughter Megan was 26. She'd just finished her master's in environmental science at UVM and was moving to Oregon in 2 weeks for a fellowship. They had 3 days. Frank had wanted to do a section of the long trail with her since she was 13. He'd waited because Megan's mother had been sick for most of those years. Then because Megan had been busy. Then because the right window kept closing. The week before Oregon was the only window left. They planned a 38-mile loop, Killington Peak to Pico Camp Shelter north along the ridge, then south back on a parallel trail. 3 nights, late September, cold mornings, mild afternoons, standard fall conditions. The first day went perfectly. Frank woke at 2:30 a.m. He'd had 2 beers at dinner. He needed to pee. He climbed out of his sleeping bag and walked 20 meters into the trees off trail. He came back 4 minutes later. Megan's sleeping bag was empty. The zipper was halfway open. Her pack and boots were where she'd set them undisturbed. He could hear her breathing. He turned. Megan was asleep 3 feet to his left in the far corner of the shelter, on the bare wooden floor. No sleeping bag at all. Curled on her side, head on her folded jacket. The half-open, empty bag was still on his right. Frank stood very still. He counted 20 seconds. He looked at the empty bag. He looked at his daughter on the floor. He could hear her breathing. Same rhythm coming from both places. He walked over to the empty bag. He put his hand inside. The interior was warm, body temperature warm. He walked back to the sleeping Megan. He touched her shoulder very lightly. She didn't stir. She breathed the same rhythm. He sat down between the 2 positions for 3 hours. By dawn, the empty bag was no longer there. Megan was back inside her sleeping bag where she'd started the night. Megan made coffee in the morning. Frank watched her without speaking for a long time. Finally, she looked up and laughed. "You look like you saw a ghost." "Dad, did you have a weird dream?" "Because I had the strangest one." Frank asked her what. "I dreamed I woke up at like 2:30 and I saw you leave the shelter and I followed you. Through the trees. I followed you for a long time. I don't know what I was doing. I never caught up to you. Then I woke up." She poured the coffee. "I haven't sleepwalked since I was 8. Frank didn't tell her about the empty bag. That afternoon they were hiking the ridge. The trail thinned and Megan walked ahead. Frank fell back to filter water from a spring. He looked up. He saw Megan ahead of him on the trail. He also saw Megan on the rocky outcrop 100 meters east across the saddle, walking the same direction. Same red shirt, same gait, same pack. He shouted. Both figures turned. Both were Megan. The Megan on the trail laughed and waved. The Megan on the outcrop didn't wave. The Megan on the outcrop stood still and watched. Frank caught up to his daughter. He asked if she'd seen herself. Megan stared at him. "Dad, are you okay? You're white. You're really white. Sit down." He sat down. She gave him water. They didn't talk about it. They hiked another 6 miles, set up camp, ate dinner, slept. Night 2 passed quietly. Frank woke on morning 3 wearing Megan's red shell jacket. Megan's jacket. On him. He could see her sleeping next to him wearing his dark navy fleece. He stared at this for 10 minutes. He could not remember switching coats. He had no memory of getting cold during the night. The fleece had not been removed from his pack as far as he could recall. He'd worn it to sleep. He sat up slowly. He took off the red jacket and folded it. He laid it next to Megan's pack. He took his fleece back from Megan's body without waking her, as carefully as a man lifting a blanket off something fragile. He put the fleece on. He sat with his hands on his knees until she woke up. When Megan woke, she looked at the red jacket folded neatly beside her. "I don't remember taking that off," she said. Frank didn't either. They hiked out that day, 10 miles, faster than planned. They didn't stop for lunch. A year passed. Megan moved to Oregon. Frank stayed in Vermont. They talked once a week. 11 months after the hike, at 1:15 a.m. Pacific time, Megan's phone rang. "Frank, Megan, you're dreaming right now. You're dreaming that you woke up and saw me walking ahead of you in the woods. You're following me. You can't catch up." Megan didn't say anything for a moment. Then she said, "Yeah, Dad." "How did you know?" Frank said. "Because I'm awake. And you're the one walking ahead of me in our woods. I've been following you for an hour." Neither of them remembers ending the call. Both phones logged it as 53 minutes long. Megan never hiked the long trail again. Frank doesn't go back either. The old Abenaki name for that ridge, in records kept by a Burlington historian in the 1960s, translates roughly as the trading place. One more. Some woods give you back what you forgot to bury. Wade Thompson was 61. Retired mountain power lineman. He'd worked 38 years climbing poles in the Southwest, New Mexico, Arizona, West Texas. He'd raised 2 daughters in Las Cruces. His wife Patty was a school nurse, both kids grown. Granddaughter coming in November. In April of 2024, Wade drove out to a cabin in the Gila National Forest. Family cabin, built by his father in 1968. Wade hadn't been there in 30 years. His 2 brothers had owned the cabin with him. Older brother Tom died of a heart attack in 2012. Younger brother Calvin died in a logging accident in 2008. Wade was the last one. The cabin was his to deal with. He'd promised Patty he'd close it out, sell the land, move on. He drove the 3 hours from Las Cruces alone. 2 days, get it done, drive back. He parked at the old turnout 6 kilometers from the cabin. The road past the turnout had washed out in '89 and never been repaired. He shouldered his pack and hiked in. After about an hour, he found a fresh boot print on the trail. His exact size. Same tread as the Vasque trappers he wore. Same brand, same model. He looked at his own boots and looked at the print and thought, "That's mine." But the print was facing the direction he was walking, not back from where he came. Like someone had walked ahead of him. He kept hiking. He got to the cabin at sunset. The door was open. There was smoke coming from the chimney. He stood at the gate for a long time. Then he walked up to the porch and called inside. Nothing answered. He stepped in. The wood stove was hot. There was a beer on the kitchen table, open condensation on the bottle. The 2 beds in the back room were both made up neatly with the green wool blankets his father had bought at an army surplus in 1970. No one was in the cabin. The cabin smelled like coffee and wood smoke and his brother Calvin's pipe tobacco. Calvin had been dead 16 years. Wade sat at the kitchen table for an hour. He didn't drink the beer. He didn't go in the back room. He thought about leaving. Instead, he wrote a note. He had a pad of yellow legal paper and a number 2 pencil in his pack. He wrote, "Wade was here. May 4th, 2024. He put the note on the table next to the beer. He weighted it with a salt shaker. He walked out of the cabin and made camp a kilometer away in a juniper draw. He spent the night with his back to a rock and his pocket knife open in his hand. He did not sleep. Morning he walked back. The cabin was different. The wood stove was cold and empty. The kitchen table was bare. No beer, No salt shaker, no note. The beds in the back room were stripped. The green blankets folded at the foot, dust on top. The cabin smelled like dust and old wood and the dry mineral smell of an arid place. It looked like it had not been entered in 3 decades. His note was gone. Wade stood in the doorway. He turned to leave. He saw a folded piece of yellow legal paper attached to the outside of the cabin door with a thumbtack. He hadn't put it there. He hadn't seen it when he walked up. It was on the outside. He took it down. He unfolded it. The handwriting was his own. He could see the way he made his W's, the way he never closed the lowercase a's, the slight back slant from holding the pencil at the angle his father had taught him in 2nd grade. The note read, "Wade. Next time, light the stove. Leave the note under the rock by the porch, not on the table. Signed, W." The handwriting was his handwriting. The instructions weren't his. He carried the note out. He drove home. He did not tell Patty for 2 days. When Wade showed Patty the note, she looked at it for a long moment. Then she said, "Wade, that's not your handwriting." He told her it was. He'd written it. It was his hand. He showed her his work logs for comparison. Patty said, "Wade, that handwriting matches your brother Tom. I used to grade his lesson plans when he was teaching at Carlsbad High in the 90s. That's Tom's hand." Wade pulled an old box from the garage that night. Letters Tom had sent him from his 3 years in the Air Force between 67 and 70. Tom died in 2012. Wade had kept the letters. He hadn't looked at them since the funeral. The handwriting in the note from the cabin matched Tom's letters, not Wade's. The W's, the A's, the backslant, all Tom's. Wade looked at his own letters from the same period, the ones to his parents from his early lineman years. His handwriting was completely different. His brothers had inherited their father's forward tilt. Wade's had drifted backward sometime in his 30s like it was trying to lean away from the family. The note from the cabin tilted forward. Wade does not know whose hand wrote the note. He keeps it in a fireproof safe in his bedroom. He has not gone back to the cabin. He has not sold the land. His granddaughter was born in November 2024. Patty picked her middle name, Thomasine, after Wade's brother. 3 men who watched and were watched, 3 points of view from the other side of the trees. A private investigator who saw himself on a camera he never stood in front of. A father and daughter who traded places in a forest neither of them invited. A retired lineman who got a note from a hand that wasn't his in handwriting that was his brother's. If you made it this far, you're who I write these for. There are 2 more like this one coming. Wednesday, Saturday. Or stay where you are. The trees are quiet right now.